He's a senior public policy fellow at the American University of Beirut. He joins us on Skype from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Rami, great to have you here again on the News Hour. Let's go back just a few days. What the information minister said, was there anything factually inaccurate about what he said?
No, what he said was about Saudis being involved in the Yemen war is absolutely correct. Just that in the tradition of inter-Arab politics, with its hypocrisy and protocol and all the things that people do to stay in touch, is you're not supposed to say things in public, even if they're true. But this is bigger than that. It's because there is a complex relationship between the Saudi government and the state of Lebanon and the various actors, particularly the Sunni of Lebanon, traditionally recently led by Rafiq Hariri. And so there's other factors. They just used that statement by the information minister as an excuse to try a new way to pressure Lebanon into trying to reduce Hezbollah's role. They've been trying to do this for over a decade, and it hasn't worked, and it probably won't work.
So what was the diplomatic rabbit out the hat that the French President Emmanuel Macron produced at some point, we guess, over the past, 24 hours, or his people were talking to MBS's people, that ended up with this triangulated conversation between MBS inside the palace in Riyadh, and Monsieur Macron, and the government in Beirut?
I think what's going on is the Saudis feel a little bit isolated. They've failed in virtually every initiative they've taken in the Middle East, in Yemen, and Qatar, and Lebanon, and Iran, and virtually every foreign policy initiative they've taken under Mohammed bin Salman has failed or backfired. And they really are trying to figure out a new way to re-engage diplomatically with other countries in the region and in the world. The American president won't talk to the Saudi crown prince because of the Khashoggi assassination. And so the Saudi leadership feels a little bit isolated among some people in the world. Macron sees this as an opportunity to step in, sell arms to the Emiratis, sell arms to other people, reestablish some kind of French role in the region. So everybody sees some kind of benefit in this, as seen from the Saudi perspective. The fact is that the French have simply played a very normal diplomatic game, which is to try to find a face-saving way to allow people to step back from the confrontation and make believe everything is fine and go back to normal ties. And the French do that with a certain panache, which they've always had. At the same time, they're supporting autocrats in Egypt and selling arms to the Emiratis and doing things that a lot of people complain about. But that's how state-to-state relations are. This is not a game of righteous politics. This is a game of power politics in reality. And Macron is showing that he's willing to play this game as well as anybody else.
How will this go down in Tehran? Because we're kind of having to focus in now on a re-illumination, if you will, of the Iranian fingerprints, or footprints, maybe I should say, in Lebanon. But that's nothing new. That's been there for a long, long time.
Yes, and it's more than a fingerprint or a footprint. And it's a little bit less than a stranglehold, but it's an embrace. It's a controlling embrace that the Iranians and Hezbollah have in Lebanon. They are the strongest group militarily and politically. They're also among the most dynamic. They're willing to do things that other people wouldn't do. And most of the other Lebanese groups, the Sunni groups, many of the Christian groups, have pretty much lost a lot of credibility and don't have much influence or credibility anymore. And other people are trying to take their place. So the Iranians have a very clear, long-term and patient policy in Lebanon. They've got their links with Hezbollah, which are very tight. Hezbollah is trying to expand Iranian interaction with Lebanon. For instance, they brought in Iranian diesel oil to help deal with the fuel shortages. Iran is offering to set up some electricity plants, which Lebanon urgently needs. So they're trying to find other ways whereby Iran and Lebanon can have more active and normal relations. But the majority of Lebanese, I would say, a small majority, are worried about that. They don't want Lebanon to be dominated by Iran. That means to them also that Syrian influence and domination would return in the country. They don't particularly want that either. Neither do they want Saudi domination. So what's going to happen in Lebanon is they're going to find a formula whereby things probably go back to what they were a year or two ago, where the Saudis have a little bit of influence, the Iranians have a little bit more, the Syrians are quiet, trying to solve their own problems first. And essentially, no big changes will come out of this in the strategic or long-term sense. And this is a situation, the French understand this, and they are trying to exploit it to improve their bilateral and military sales and other relations in the region. I don't think we'll expect anything significant coming out of Iran, and particularly because the Iranians and the Emiratis and the Saudis are kind of playing footsies and holding hands under the table, trying to resume a certain serious dialogue about normalizing relations and stop accusing each other of trying to attack and extinguish each other. So there's an incredible movement, reconfiguration of diplomatic and strategic relations and influences across most of the Middle East that involves Turkey, Israel, Iran, the Saudis, Emiratis, etc. And this is part of that process. But the central point here, I think, is the Saudis are trying seriously, almost desperately, to find a role for themselves in the region, and they think maybe Lebanon might be a way to do that, but they're not going to do it through their traditional link with Saad Hariri. They're probably going to try to do it working through the cabinet of ministers and the presidency of Lebanon, who now are involved in this process, and that probably won't succeed any better than their previous attempts.
Rami, thank you so much, as ever. Rami Khouri talking to us there from Cambridge, Massachusetts.